Have you ever watched someone walk into a room and, without saying a word, completely shift the atmosphere? They don't demand attention. They don't raise their voice. They don't argue, beg, or explain. They simply exist, still, grounded, silent. And yet, somehow, everyone notices. People lean in. They second-guess their last words. They soften their tone. The room changes. Because of one person's refusal to react. This is the quiet power of withdrawal, the power of choosing not to fight for space, but to let presence speak louder than performance. Now imagine if you did the same. Imagine no longer reacting to every interruption, every disrespect, every passive-aggressive jab. Imagine pausing instead of pushing, holding your silence instead of defending your worth. What would that do to the people around you? Some would get confused, some would feel unsettled, and some, the ones used to your predictable patterns, would start to panic because silence disrupts the script. When you stop responding, you stop playing the role. And when you stop playing the role, people lose the control they thought they had over you. What you're doing isn't passive, it's precise. It's choosing your power over their chaos. This isn't about shutting people out. It's about tuning back into yourself, reclaiming the energy that's been leaking through reactions, reclaiming the time you've spent chasing closure, proving your value, explaining your intentions. You are not here to be constantly understood. You are here to be whole. And wholeness begins when you learn to stay quiet while the world expects you to perform. That's the invitation, not to escape, but to rise, to anchor, to become unavailable in the best way possible. Here's a truth most people won't admit. They don't love you. They love their access to you, your availability, your responses, your emotional presence on demand. What they've really come to depend on is the role you play in their world. The comfort of knowing you'll pick up, reply fast, say yes, calm them down, explain yourself even when it tears at your soul. But the moment you withdraw, the illusion cracks. The moment you stop replying immediately, stop rescuing, stop reacting, something unspoken happens. People don't just notice. They unravel. They start wondering, what's wrong with them? Why are they acting distant? Are they trying to punish me? But in reality, you're not punishing anyone. You're simply reclaiming yourself. And that simple act of reclaiming, of no longer being constantly available, is terrifying to those who built comfort on your emotional compliance. Because when you step out of the role, you force people to see what they were really relating to. Not you, but the version of you who always made it easy to be irresponsible, easy to take without giving, easy to project onto without question. And when that version disappears, so does their control. You're not changing the relationship, you're revealing it. You're no longer feeding the dynamic that required your emotional sacrifice to function. And this shift, this powerful withdrawal, doesn't just make people uncomfortable. It exposes the truth. It shows you who only loved your function, not your soul. That's not rejection. That's revelation. It's the kind of clarity that can only rise in the space silence creates. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." It sounds wise, philosophical even. But when you actually sit with it, it cuts deeper than most truths you're used to hearing. Because what if your frustration isn't about others at all? What if it's a mirror, reflecting how much of yourself you've been giving away, just to be accepted? Let's be honest. How many times have you said yes just to avoid conflict, even as something inside you screamed no? How many times have you explained yourself to people who were never listening in the first place? How often do you rush to fix things that you didn't even break just to keep the peace? You tell yourself you're being kind, compassionate, helpful. But here's the hard truth. You're not being kind. You're being controlled by fear, by guilt, by the need to be liked, by the story you've told yourself that your value lies in your usefulness. Every forced smile, every swallowed truth, every time you made yourself small to keep someone else comfortable. That wasn't love. It was self-abandonment in disguise. And the more you do it, the more invisible you become. Not because you aren't valuable, but because people start to treat you the way you treat yourself, as optional, as convenient, as available, always. That's the mask. The mask Jung called the persona, the false self we wear to feel accepted, safe, included. But it comes at a price, because the longer you wear it, the further you drift from your true self. And what's worse, you start to forget who you were without it. You think availability makes you noble, but in reality, it makes you a target. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to manipulate. The more you show up on cue, the more people believe they can summon you whenever it suits them. And every time you say, "It's okay," when it clearly isn't, you reinforce the lie that you can be stretched endlessly and still be whole. You can't. There is a cost to the mask, and it's paid in silence, in fatigue, in the slow erosion of self-respect. It's time to look at who you've become to make others comfortable and ask yourself, is it worth losing yourself to be liked by people who don't even see the real you? Carl Jung didn't view the mind as a machine, a system that simply runs, reacts, and resets. He saw it as a living energy field, a system with limits, pressure points, and consequences. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every conversation, every inner battle, every outward reaction costs you something. That cost is psychic energy. And just like physical energy, it isn't infinite. You only have so much to give before you feel empty, disoriented, or deeply tired, and not from work, but from constantly fighting invisible emotional wars. So here's the question Jung would ask you. Are you choosing where your energy goes, or are you leaking it by default? Every time you respond to a provocation, just to prove you're not weak, you spend energy. Every time you justify your silence to someone who has no interest in understanding you, you spend energy. Every time you replay a painful memory, relive an unfair conversation, or spiral over what-ifs and should-haves, you are hemorrhaging energy with zero return on investment. And the real trap? Most of this isn't happening outside of you. It's happening in your own mind, in the stories you rehearse, and the emotions you absorb without boundaries. You think you're being strong by responding to everything, but you're actually exhausting yourself. Because not everything deserves a reaction. Not every battle needs a warrior. Not every fire needs your water. Not every invitation to chaos requires your presence. We live in a world that celebrates fast response. Text back right away, speak up immediately, never stay silent. But what that culture never taught you is how much of your inner power you lose through constant, unconscious reaction. You are not just tired, you're drained. Drained from defending your truth to people who twist it. Drained from participating in conversations that never lead to peace. Drained from overgiving in situations that only take and take and take. This isn't about becoming numb, it's about becoming discerning. Energy is your currency, and you've been spending it on relationships, thoughts, and battles that never pay you back. So starting now, begin asking the most important question before every reaction, every reply, every involvement. Is this worth my energy? If the answer is no, you don't owe a single drop more. How many nights have you lost to thoughts that don't let go? You replay the scene again. The words they said, the ones you didn't say, the way they made you feel. Unseen, misunderstood, discarded. You rewrite the dialogue in your head, trying to fix it retroactively, as if closure could be summoned from memory alone. But this isn't reflection. It's rumination. It's emotional self-harm dressed as clarity. What you're doing is feeding ghosts, ghosts of old arguments, ghosts of one-sided love, ghosts of relationships that existed more in your mind than in reality. And these ghosts, they survive off your attention. They grow stronger every time you revisit what should have been buried. You think you're trying to understand, to process, to find peace. But what you're actually doing is resurrecting pain. Every mental replay is like cutting a wound open again, just to see if it still bleeds. And you wonder why you feel tired, anxious, emotionally hollow. It's because you're still having conversations that no longer exist outside your head. You're still explaining yourself to people who stopped listening long ago, still hoping they'll see your side in a story they've already walked away from. You're keeping alive a dynamic that only lives through your participation. And the longer you engage with it, the longer it stays attached to you. But here's something no one tells you. You don't need to win the argument to heal. You don't need closure from someone who lacks the capacity to give it. You just need to close the door, yourself. Let silence be the period at the end of the sentence. Let absence speak what words never could. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from understanding. It comes from refusing to open that emotional door again. You are not obligated to carry these ghosts. You are not a cemetery for broken conversations and unfinished stories. The next time your mind invites you back into the past for another replay, ask yourself, does this bring me peace, or just keep me in pieces? And if the answer is pain, don't step through that door. Ghosts only haunt the places we keep open. You think you're in control, that your reactions are deliberate, that you're choosing when to respond and how. But the truth is far darker. You've been programmed, not by machines, but by experiences, by trauma, by guilt, by emotional patterns you never questioned. And the people who understand this, they know how to play you like a piano. They don't yell, they don't threaten, they don't have to. All they need to do is press the right emotional key. Guilt, fear, obligation, shame, and you'll dance the same old steps. You'll over-explain. You'll apologize even when you didn't do anything wrong. You'll chase after people who have already chosen to misunderstand you, not because you want to, but because you've always done it. Carl Jung called this projection a psychological phenomenon where people offload their disowned feelings onto others. But there's another side to that mirror. When you're overly available, overly reactive, you don't just absorb projections. You become a canvas for them. People stop seeing you. They start seeing what they need you to be, the therapist, the emotional punching bag, the savior, the one who never says no. And the worst part? You accept those roles because they make you feel needed. Because deep down you're terrified of being irrelevant, of being seen as selfish, of being left behind. But here's the trap. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They don't need control. They just need your predictability. They count on your reflexes, your need to fix, to respond, to soothe. So they provoke you subtly. They withdraw affection. They say something that stings, then claim you're too sensitive, and just like that you respond. You try to fix it. You make it about you. And the cycle repeats. You think you're having a relationship, but really you're dancing with someone else's shadow and calling it love. Here's the truth Jung wanted us to see. The moment you stop reacting, the illusion collapses. The mask falls. And the person in front of you is forced to face something terrifying. Not you, but themselves. Because when the mirror stops reflecting, they have to look within. And many would rather destroy the mirror than do that kind of inner work. So they'll call you distant, cold, changed. But what really changed was your refusal to be manipulated by emotional defaults. The question now is, will you keep reacting to stay comfortable? Or will you withdraw to see the truth? Because the mirror only works if you keep showing up to reflect. The world is loud. Every platform screams for attention. Every conversation demands a reply. Every disagreement feels like a battle you have to win. Right now. We're trained to believe that fast responses equal strength, That silence is weakness. That if you don't speak, you'll be misunderstood, or worse, forgotten. But here's a truth most people miss. Silence is a weapon. And most people have no defense against it. Not the silence of avoidance, not the silence of fear, but a deliberate, grounded, razor-sharp silence. The kind of silence that radiates presence, the kind that makes people wonder, not because you're invisible, but because you've become unreadable. And that terrifies those who relied on your predictability. When you stop reacting, you take away the fuel they used to feed on. They can't twist your words because you've given them none. They can't manipulate your feelings because you're not performing them anymore. They can't control the story because you've stepped off the stage. And that shift is more powerful than any confrontation, because while you're silent, they're spiraling. They project. They overthink. They try to provoke. Why? Because they don't miss you. They miss the role you played, the access, the reaction, the control, and your silence becomes their mirror. Suddenly they have to sit with themselves, and not everyone is built for that. But here's the secret. True silence isn't about withholding. It's about reclaiming. It's saying, I'm no longer available for chaos. I'm no longer obligated to explain my worth. I'm choosing my energy. I'm choosing my peace. It's a declaration made without a sound, and the ones who truly respect you won't panic when you go quiet. They'll understand. They'll match your stillness with safety, not accusations. But the ones who depended on your noise, on your emotional labor, they'll start to crumble, because silence breaks the game. It changes the rules mid-play. And those who once pulled your strings suddenly find themselves holding nothing. You don't have to argue to win. You don't have to explain to be valid. You don't have to respond to claim your power. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. When you first start pulling away, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity, something strange happens. You feel guilty, guilty for not replying, guilty for needing space, guilty for choosing your own peace over someone else's chaos. You've been conditioned to believe that distance equals cruelty, that solitude is selfish, that silence means something's wrong. But what if silence is exactly what's right? Carl Jung understood this better than most. He called it individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are, apart from who the world expects you to be. And here's what Jung taught. You cannot become whole while still being tethered to everyone else's expectations, to their projections, to their versions of who you should be. At some point, you have to walk alone. Not forever, but long enough to hear your own voice without interference, long enough to recognize the difference between your true self and your social performance. And that path, it doesn't run through crowds. It runs through silence, through sacred isolation, through the brave act of stepping back from people, places, and habits that no longer align with your becoming. It's painful. You'll feel misunderstood. You'll be labeled as distant, different, even disloyal. But here's the thing, you're not leaving them behind. You're returning to yourself. The ones who fall away during this season were never holding on to your soul. Only your service, only your availability, only the version of you that made them comfortable. Let them go, because in the quiet that follows, something sacred begins to arrive. Clarity, calm, an inner compass that doesn't sway with approval or rejection. You realize you're no longer afraid of being alone. Because being alone with truth feels better than being surrounded in pretense. And from that space, you begin to rebuild. Not a persona, but a presence. One that doesn't need to shout, one that doesn't over-explain, one that simply is. You'll be misunderstood by many, but you'll finally be understood by the one person who matters most, yourself. There's a difference between disappearing because life overwhelms you and choosing to be unavailable because your peace is finally a priority. You've likely been praised for being the reliable one, the one who always shows up, the one who answers the phone at midnight, drops everything to soothe someone else's crisis, and stretches your time, your energy, your sanity to accommodate everyone but yourself. And you've done it so long, it feels like duty. It feels like love, it feels like identity. But let me ask you, what's left for you when the calls end, the room is quiet, and you've given everything away? This is the part no one talks about. That good person role you've been playing is often just a mask for self-neglect. Not because your heart isn't kind, but because your boundaries were never taught to be as strong as your compassion. So let's be clear, conscious unavailability is not arrogance, it's wisdom. It's realizing that you can't keep pouring from a vessel that's cracked and empty. It's understanding that people who truly care for you will never require your constant exhaustion as proof of your love. It's recognizing that the world won't collapse if you don't answer every message, if you wait before responding, if you decide not to engage, and if someone punishes you for taking space, for choosing peace, for not being instantly accessible, they were never respecting you. They were using you. So here's the new pattern. Instead of replying in panic, pause. Instead of saying yes by default, breathe. Instead of justifying your no, stand firm. Practice the small shifts that create massive change. Turn your phone off without guilt. Leave texts on read without shame. Let the call go to voicemail. Let the plan fall through. Let someone else take responsibility for once. Your job is no longer to be emotionally available to anyone, anytime, for anything. Your job is to protect your energy as if it were gold, because it is. Being available to everyone is how you slowly disappear from yourself. So the next time you're about to say, "It's fine, I'll handle it," ask yourself, is this me or the old version of me that was afraid to disappoint? You don't need permission to choose your peace. You don't owe access. You don't owe explanations. You only owe yourself the life you were meant to live. And that life begins with boundaries. When you finally stop showing up for everyone else, not out of anger but out of exhaustion, something strange greets you at the door. Silence. At first, it feels foreign, uncomfortable, even cruel. You hear thoughts you've been running from. You notice emotions you've numbed with activity. You feel the ache of distance, not just from others, but from the version of you that once made everyone else feel whole. And in that silence, doubt creeps in. Did I go too far? Did I make a mistake? Have I pushed people away who truly cared? But stay a little longer. Sit with the stillness, and you'll begin to notice something new. The silence softens, then it steadies, then it starts to sing, not with noise, but with clarity. You begin to breathe deeper, think clearer, sleep better, not because the world has changed, but because you have stopped spinning to match it. You're no longer chasing validation, no longer auditioning for roles you never wanted to play in the first place. You're coming home to yourself. It doesn't happen all at once. Some days you'll miss the chaos because it was familiar. Some days you'll feel tempted to reach back out, explain, fix, prove. But then you'll remember how tired you were, how much of yourself you lost just trying to keep peace that never lasted. And slowly, a different kind of strength takes root, a strength that doesn't shout, that doesn't perform, that doesn't seek applause. This is the rebirth, where your worth is no longer tied to how fast you respond, how much you tolerate, how self-sacrificing you can be. Now it's tied to your boundaries, to your presence, to your deepening calm. You begin to feel whole, not because others finally gave you what you needed, but because you stopped abandoning yourself to be needed. This is the version of you that people won't know how to label. You're not cold. You're just clear. You're not distant, you're just not available for dysfunction anymore. And what you gain is far greater than anything you've let go. Your time, your truth, your emotional clarity, your sacred no, your unshakable yes to yourself. This is the new beginning, the version of you that is no longer shaped by pressure, but by purpose. If you've made it this far, then something inside you has already shifted. You've heard the silence. You've felt the ache of emotional distance. You've tasted the loneliness that comes with no longer showing up on cue for everyone else. But more importantly, you've also begun to feel the calm, the clarity, the quiet confidence of someone who has stopped chasing approval and started honoring truth. Still, one final question remains. Are you ready to be misunderstood for choosing yourself? Because you will be. You'll be called cold by people who only knew you as warm when it served them. You'll be called selfish by those who expected your sacrifice to be endless. You'll be called distant by those who only valued your presence when it was convenient. But here's the truth most don't tell you. To choose your peace in a world that profits from your urgency is an act of radical courage. It's easy to blend in, to keep nodding, to keep explaining, to keep overgiving in the name of love, loyalty, or legacy. What's hard is stepping into a version of yourself that doesn't rely on being needed to feel worthy. Because when you become unavailable for emotional crumbs, for one-sided conversations, for guilt-tripped obligations, for identity built on exhaustion, you lose people. You lose patterns. You lose the stories that made you feel safe. But what you gain is real. You gain wholeness. You gain peace. You gain a life that no longer runs on should, but on sacred alignment. You stop explaining your silence. You stop apologizing for your absence. You stop defending your boundaries as if they need permission, because the truth is, you don't owe anyone an explanation for finally choosing yourself. This is the kind of freedom that makes others uncomfortable, especially those who benefited from the older version of you. So don't expect a celebration, don't expect applause, expect resistance, expect pushback, expect silence from people who only applauded when you were giving yourself away. But also expect this. Expect deeper breath, more restful nights, more honest connections, fewer regrets, fewer masks, fewer emotional hangovers. And if this message has stirred something in you, something that feels raw but right, type it in the comments. I choose my peace. Say it aloud, write it somewhere you can see it every day. Because that sentence is the beginning of a new relationship with yourself. And when you're ready, click into the next video. We're not just talking about boundaries here, we're rebuilding lives one truth at a time.